Recently, my friend Nicholas Mim and I decided to enter the Music Bed Challenge with a Spec ad, and I figured since people like behind-the-scenes stuff, I would share what that experience was like and how we executed the project within the span of about 2 weeks. If you haven't seen the spec yet, please follow the link in the description here and check it out. And if it's before May 27th, go vote for it. We need as many votes as we can get on that thing, and I never ask anyone for anything, so hook it up. Anyway, pre-production was relatively simple, but took some time. First, obviously, we had to come up with an idea, but luckily Nick had been sitting on this one for a while, so that was fine. We sat around discussing various ways we could tackle the idea, Nick wanting to lean into sort of a Cinderella story. So I suggested something along the lines of a black and white perfume ad. Initially, we were going to make it weirder than it ended up being because, you know, all perfume ads are kind of nonsensical, but we'll cover that later. I spent a bunch of time on Shot Deck finding references for nighttime black and white exteriors, and that helped me decide on how I was going to go about lighting this thing economically, efficiently, and most importantly, as fast as possible. I settled on a soft-ish key for the subjects and a big raking light in the backgrounds, modifying that setup kind of as needed. Since we were shooting black and white, I was more concerned about contrast and texture than anything, and since it was a perfume ad, that was a bit montagey. The light didn't have to be super motivated, although I think it all does look quite natural on this side of, you know, the project. Once we had the concept, we needed the locations. So initially we scouted this really cool place that looks like an old German town, but come to find out, even though it's technically a shopping mall, people do live there, and the HOA of all people denied our request twice. This really threw a wrench in the gears because essentially our entire shoot was supposed to take place there and at Nick's house. So if we were able to get that location, we wouldn't have had any company moves. The production and set design basically would have been taken care of, and even some of the lighting was usable for our needs. But that didn't end up working. So taking that on the chin, we searched for somewhere else to film and settled on the Arts District in downtown Los Angeles, as well as the steps of the US Bank building. From there, I reached out to Atlas Lens Co. to see if they'd lend me a set of their Silver Series Orions, which they graciously agreed to do, as well as film tools for some lights, which was an Aputure 1200D and a 600D with a lantern attachment, and grip and cables from them. All of that coupled with a quick rental from Stray Angel in West LA for some additional gear like Teradek and the PL mount for my C500 here. And from there, we were pretty much good to go on gear. I also needed a little putt-putt generator, so I got that from Stray as well. The Atlas Silvers are similar to the original Orions, but they have more of like a unique flare that takes on the color of the light that's flaring, although in black and white, that doesn't necessarily matter, and seems to produce a more full flare, sort of, that I really like. That has a bit more going on, a lot more elements in the flare, so to speak, especially on the 40 millimeter. The 40 millimeter, it's this really cool effect that stands out and isn't just like a thin line like on the original Orions or some other anamorphics. I also prefer the Silver Series' fall off to the original Orions, especially wide open, which is apparently attributed to an adjustment in the spacing between the lens elements that's different than the originals, but I'm not a lens person, so you know what? Get the Cine Lens manual, and that'll make more sense. So production was going to be incredibly run and gun, and we did know that going in. Nick and I roughed out a shot list, but due to the accelerated timetable and the locations changing, we knew that we'd be winging it to a degree. For crew, I reached out to my friends David Howard, a Steadicam operator, and Adam Green, a fellow camera guy, and they made up our entire crew. We also had our actors, two friends from college, Stephanie Martinez and Abraham and Tanya, and they were expertly styled by Jensen Lee, who hilariously enough put her laptop on black and white mode while finding the costumes for us, and she would send us photos that way, so, you know, real team player. It really did help, though. For Steph, we went for something sort of shiny to really pop in black and white and really kick off the lights, and Abraham got more of a traditional tan and white cotton or wool suit. I couldn't tell you what the fabric was. Gear-wise, like I said, we shot on my C500 Mark II in RAW, so the 6K full-frame mode, to really give me the most room to play around with in post or really, you know, fix things I couldn't shoot properly there, as well as use as much of the anamorphics imaging circle as possible. Interestingly enough, even without the full-frame expander module from Atlas, the lenses covered my sensor, at least height-wise. So I didn't have to do too much weird stuff, and also didn't have to use Super 35 mode, which kind of would have been a bummer. So that was really nice. I also rented a Teradek and Nucleus M from Strangel so I could pull focus wirelessly, and paired the Teradek with my Small HD 702 Bright. I thought the battery life actually was going to be an issue, but I had just bought these Core V98 Nanos from Core, and these little guys are awesome. I had just bought these from Film Tools like the week before the shoot, and one of these powered the camera, the Nucleus motor, and the Teradek transmitter basically all night. In any case, my friends at Death & Company graciously let us film out in front of their bar during operating hours, which is very nice of them, so that we could get the intro sequence shot, and that came out great in my opinion. The location had some awesome lights kind of strung overhead down the street where our characters would be running, which looked fantastic, especially in anamorphic, and since we were friendly with the location, we got to take our time and shoot it properly, only having to hold for people entering or leaving, which wasn't too often. One challenge here was the fact that it was in an operating restaurant, or outside of one, so I didn't want to cause too much of a ruckus for our aforementioned friends. That meant not using the generator. So instead, I grabbed a C-stand and knuckled in a diffusion frame, and then attached two Aputure MCs magnetically to the pointy end, and then kind of used an arm to attach a Godox M1 as well. And that seemed to work out pretty well for us. Luckily, there was lighting outside the door of the bar, so that provided ambient fill, where my weird little light combo situation handled the key, giving us some contrast. So after Death & Co., we ran down the street where my cart broke, and shot the stuff against the brick walls, so the running sequence, and Steph backed up against the wall. And for that, I used the Aputure 1200D on the generator across the street as a backlight key kind of hybrid thing, and I was willing to let it be kind of sourcey because that felt fashiony, you know, for some reason. From there, we moved around the corner and just did the setup where Steph leans up against the wall. And here I actually had my Nanlite 200 in the Aputure lantern, simply because I knew I didn't need a ton of light, and I didn't really want to deal with the ballast because we were really pushing it on time, and I knew all I needed was a regular power cable, which these things are called, this is regular power cable, these things are called OSHA cables, come to find out. Like computer cables, like a PlayStation cable, or just call it OSHA cable. Didn't know that. And I could just put it up, the Nanlite up really fast as light. You know, I'd carry the whole setup by myself and just run, and then had that big 100-footer Stinger running all the way to the generator over by Abraham, which was powering the 1200D, now hitting him as he rounded the corner. The 1200D was cut with, in that setup, was cut with that frame of diffusion we used earlier, expertly held by Adam. When we got Abraham's close-up, I just picked up the stand with the lantern on it and brought it over to him to give him sort of a soft topper, acting like the street lamp that he was standing under. From there, we headed over to the US Bank building, and that's when we were able to kind of take a breath. They let us go as long as we needed, and since we didn't have any company moves, we definitely took the time to sort of talk things over, and I got to be slightly more methodical with the light. That location is already pre-lit with some really nice architectural lights, especially in the bushes and the trees, so I knew that I just needed to add some sort of drama and shape. Luckily, I was on the scout where we checked out those steps, so I knew, you know, where I was going to put the lights and everything, and I knew I wanted a big shaft of light coming from where the actors were coming from. So our 1200D came back to handle that, and then I placed a few of those Aputure MCs and the Godox M1 around the stairs to kind of add some pools of light to the stairs themselves, and also act as key lights for the actors to run through. At the end of the stairs, the Nanlite Aputure lantern combo was set up as a final true key light, so to speak, diagonally opposite of the 1200D, so the camera would start and end shadow side of the talent on the move. It was also perfect for Abraham's close-up when he finds the shoe, and the shoe insert, for some reason particularly, we really loved the look of in black and white. Even in color, it looks good. But yeah, we just ran that stair sequence kind of over and over again. We ended up only using, 2 seconds of it, but we definitely covered the hell out of it. And that was kind of it for the first night. 3 locations and a handful of setups each, usually leaving the camera on the Steadicam just for the sake of speed, but sometimes handheld. We mostly favored the 40mm and the 65mm if my memory serves me correctly. So night 2 was a little easier. We shot at Nick's house, getting our heroes entering the house, running up the stairs, and then ending at the bathroom. Again, if you haven't seen the spec, you should probably see it now before this whole thing's ruined for you. Since this was supposed to be a more real section than the previous shots, it wasn't so stylized. We weren't trying to get too dramatic with the lighting, opting more for like simple light coming through the window at the front door, again with the Nanlite Aputure lantern combo, and then placing that same light above the staircase skirted off from the walls. And that same light was the one lighting Abraham as he sits down next to the bathroom door, just acting as it was likely a floor lamp or something like that. And all those setups were intended to be pretty realistic. As I mentioned before, we were aiming to set the ad up like one of those weird perfume ads, which meant that we actually had filmed a scene with some partygoers, quote unquote, in what was supposed to be a bar bathroom or something similar, getting ready for the night. But we had to cut that due to time, which sucked. That setup was supposed to be really stylized and actually took the most work of any of our shots. So I figure I'll show it here and then I'll talk about it because it did take effort and it looks really dope. If you've ever had to shoot a scene in a bathroom, you'll know just how annoying it can be. They're really small. There's nowhere to put your lights usually. They're hard to make look interesting, and oftentimes they're just plain white walls. And on top of that, like, there's a big old mirror in there, making it so your angles are super compromised. I hate shooting bathrooms, but for some reason everyone's like, and then we go to the bathroom. Don't like it. I'll spare you the details of our sort of attempts and iteration and failures to make what we had work. But in the end, we straight up covered all the walls with Duvetine with a C-stand holding a bolt of it vertically so we could hide a stand with our light on it, which again was backlighting the subjects and also reflecting into the mirror a bit so they got some level on their faces. We also added another Aputure MC in the candle holder mirror combo thing, sort of next to the sink, which flickered into their faces, which looked really good. This scene was supposed to be kind of to set up the party that Steph was leaving at the beginning of the ad, and sort of set that red herring that it was an ad for perfume. But we just couldn't get it to fit with the time allotted, and I don't believe it was impossible to fit in there, and we got close a few times in the edit, but the length of time that we had to make the thing, but also the length of time it could be was the 90-second hard cutoff. It just wasn't in the cards, and in the end, the ad didn't need it. But again, the cinematographer in me is bummed that it's not in there. We actually also got to use the Atlas 21mm anamorphic, which is an insane lens that gave us a really, really cool look, but was definitely more of a niche application and showed basically the entire bathroom. I was, however, able to sit on the bathroom sink and get both of the actresses in the shot pretty handily, and it just had a really cool separation between them. I don't know. It's I've been told that it is the only 21mm front anamorphic in existence, or at least the first one. So it's a crazy little lens. If you're in the market for a super wide angle anamorphic, check that out. It's actually brand new. They debuted it at NAB. We also did a pickup shot in a convenience store where Abraham picks up the titular toilet paper. But I don't think the manager wants us to say where we shot that, so I won't. But we are incredibly grateful that they let us go in there and get those shots, and they know who they are. So thanks to them. Moving on to post. That was pretty straightforward, actually. Nick handled the edit as he wrote the thing and knew what he wanted, and is an accomplished editor on top of being a director and producer by day. And I handled the coloring, or the black and whiting. I don't know what to call it. Since we were shooting on my C500, I had plenty of time to run a test. So I had Abraham and Nick come over before the shoot, and we shot some stuff in the street to get an idea of how we'd handle lighting and whatnot, which was great. Always run your tests. I didn't have the lenses, so I would have run some more tests with the lenses if I could have, but I do have an anamorphic adapter, so that got us kind of close, but really it was a lighting and coloring test. And so that was very important, A, for me, but B, to put Nick at ease, because he wasn't, sure what I was delivering. So from those tests, I developed a LUT that we used to shoot, and then I worked under that in the grade. So, we were sure of what we were getting. And I have to mention that simply desaturating an image isn't an accurate portrayal of black and white film stock, and it also doesn't look that good. One easy way you can do this is by simply photographing a color chart with your favorite black and white film. Mine is Fujifilm Acros, and shoot that chart at the same time with your camera of choice, and then match those two things in Resolve using the versus curves under the appropriate color space transform, obviously kicking out a LUT from there. I suppose if you wanted to mimic Acros, you could, if you have a Fujifilm camera, like digital camera, you could shoot that chart with the Acros film simulation and do the same thing there. The point here is film doesn't simply desaturate colors. It actually treats each color differently in various ways, darkening certain colors, lightening others. And so in this case, we were able to create some fantastic depth just by adjusting how each color is represented in black and white, as opposed to simply sucking the color out of the image. From there, it was mostly windows and qualifiers to make sure our subjects stood out and looked their best, brightening their faces, adding some contrast, and darkening the surrounding areas where necessary, and just making each clip match the last one, levels wise. Especially in a place like the staircase, I was able to really focus the attention on Steph, taking down the exposures on the walls. And in the convenience store, I was really able to shape the existing light, or at least the perception of it, to make Abraham pop and further suggest that it was nighttime, when in reality it was like 2 p.m. Fun fact, that doorbell shot is literally just a black flag being held up behind the door to suggest it's nighttime outside, that Nick was holding. But there's a ton of daylight flooding through that door, but since the light inside was so bright and even, it does sell as nighttime. The close-up of the hand scanning the toilet paper is handled the same way. That flag is just stopping some of the direct light from the door. You can get away with a lot in black and white. This is kind of the Clerks approach to this spec. In that regard. We picked the song that we did. It is the music bed competition after all, because the lyrics really did a fantastic job of fitting the narrative of the ad, but the music fit the tone as well. So we were kind of blessed in that regard, where the lyrics and instrumental worked great. But Nick also did a really killer job with the sound design as well, especially in that corner store sequence. When we were setting it up, he was vocalizing exactly what he wanted as he pantomimed the camera moves to me. And I think that if anything, that scene was like 1-to-1 what he acted out. I guess we'll get into the lessons we learned. I will say, while we're all proud of the result, there's definitely some things that tripped us up or made the job harder to achieve. So I figured it'd be valuable to go over those things with you here. First off, we definitely needed more hands. We tried to keep the budget as low as humanly possible since we were both paying for this thing out of pocket, but we just needed like 2 extra PAs or something to help with those company moves and to get gear moved around, from setup to setup, even to just Hollywood frames or something. We got away with it, but we definitely felt that lack of assistance. This is not, I'm not explaining in this BTS the proper way to do anything. This is less of a how-to and more of, as Adam Savage says, less of a how-to, more of a what happened. What else? Radios. We definitely needed radios. That first night we were yelling at each other like a block away, and we had to go get cars to move things after the Home Depot cart broke. We'd have one person at the top of the stairs, someone at the bottom. We'd want to communicate with Dave while he was running the Steadicam. It was just annoying. We could have just kept calling each other over and over, I guess, but it's stupid. Radios are cheap. I should have just rented 4 radios, but in my head, we were always going to be standing next to each other or something for whatever reason. Another thing that I really wanted was to have a key light that was mobile. So when we were doing these running shots, that we would have this kind of constant beauty light, but I couldn't come up with a solution I liked, especially not in the time allotted. So I went without, which to a degree did not square with our overly polished perfume ad idea and leaned a bit more naturalistic or maybe noirish. It's its own stylized thing. I wanted more beauty than style, I guess, if that makes any sense, but that's where I ended up, so it's fine. I still like the way it looks. But for that mobile key, a reflector wasn't going to cut it. And I wanted kind of a big source, a big soft source. Really what I wanted was a China ball, like a big China ball on a stick. But powering it was going to be cumbersome with a big stinger having to hang off the back, and constantly finding power for it or always using a Jenny or whatever. But wouldn't you know it, the other day I found out that Condor Blue actually makes a D-tap to AC adapter. So I could just belt mount a cinema battery and have one of those non-existent PAs carry the thing alongside the camera as a move. That would have been great, you know. I'm thinking about buying that thing. Or Condor, send me one. That'd be great. That never works. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we needed a better cart. Not to mention a bigger cart. Magliners are pretty expensive to buy, but to rent, they're practically the same price as a radio. That was a dumb thing to not think about. For whatever reason, I didn't think to ask if we could rent a magliner, but of course you can. I rented a gas can and a leaf blower, for heaven's sake. Magliners are totally rentable. You know, they're not, everyone uses them. And a big thing too is they break down. You know, the Home Depot cart was always assembled, so it took up a ton of room in my truck. It was Magliner radios, PAs. Also, having a good AD. I don't think we necessarily needed one for this shoot, but I think Nick and I I can speak for him here, you know, I think we both would have preferred one, all things being equal. You know, a great AD is an absolute lifesaver on set, as well as a scripty, but we definitely didn't need a scripty for this one, as it was so simple and we were just, you know, it's a montage. But yeah, an AD, and if you're doing something a little more involved than this, scripty. You know, sort of similarly, Nick is a really accomplished producer in his own right, and his pre-production work, scouting locations, oftentimes without having to leave his house, finding and getting the proper permits and everything like that, just made it so easy, at least for me, and left it so that I could focus just on production challenges, which is where my brain's at and you know what I'm good at, and not worry about that kind of stuff. Although I did secure 2 of the locations for us, so goody for me. Besides that floating key that I wanted, and maybe the lack of a giant overhead light, which I wasn't going to get even with 3 times our meager budget. All in all, I think we made something really fun with friends that we love, that looks great, and everyone's happy with. So you can't ask for more than that, you know? Once again, I have to give a huge thanks to Atlas Lens Co., Film Tools, Stray Angel, Death & Company, and the unnamed but very helpful corner store. And our crew of Adam Green, David Howard, Jensen Lee, and Anna Marie Johnson, who helped Nick with some of the pre-production stuff. Also, obviously, big shout out to our actors, Steph Martinez and Abraham Antonia, as well as Rachel Mim and April Nelson, the latter 2 of which you didn't actually end up seeing in the final spec, but you did see them here, and they did really great. And their scene looks awesome, so they deserve proper recognition. Again, especially because their segment looks so sick. That's going in the reel. That's about it. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask them. I'd be happy to answer. If you have any compliments, feel free to leave them. And if you have any criticisms, go ahead and write those down on a piece of paper and throw them away, because I don't care. Yeah, so I hope that was informative. I know it's a little long, but yeah, that's, I think, all I have to cover. Again, if you have any questions, just ask them and I will answer them. So thank you so much for watching and voting on the spec if you haven't, or if it's past literally the next 2 days after this goes up. And yeah, we will see you next time.